As unbelievable as it sounds, this project is still ongoing. And I'm at the point now where I'm just unwilling to give up. I will succeed at making clear castings of this thing one way or the other. Have some new materials on order. It's coming into the shop, and when they get here, we will go back to this project and you'll see what's been going on. In the meantime, I thought we'd work on this piece. It's a Lego piece sent in by Jordy from the Bionicle series of a few years ago. And yeah, it's this classic injection molded piece, therefore impossible to resin cast. But that seems to be the only thing we do around this channel nowadays, is impossible to cast pieces. So I said, all right, let's give it a go. I set the piece up with a single vent and sprue, thinking that that would be the simplest to clean up. And also I could rock the mold and that would get the air out. Poured the mold and everything went fine, looked great. And when I cut it open, also no problems, cut open just fine. Popped it into the tank, and then this happened. Excitement time. All right, let's see what we got. Oh boy, what a mess, huh? We caught all kinds of bubbles. Look at that. What a disaster. Okay, so I rocked it, successfully rocked this, but I did not successfully rock this or that. We're gonna have to make another effort at this. No big deal, we'll make a new mold and we'll go on from here. So that's where we're picking up from last week. We're gonna make a new mold with a new strategy and see if we can't make a casting that actually comes out this time. Step one is going to be to fill these holes, and because this is gonna be the parting line on this plane, and so we're gonna need to block these holes off to create that rubber surface. To do that, I'm going to use a new material that was just sent to us by our good friends at Freeman Manufacturing. It's a kind of sticky wax. Jewelers use it like to hold gemstones in place. So it's different than the sticky wax that we're used to using because it is always sticky. It's definitely got tack to it. It's not hard sticky wax like the kind we normally use around here. Let's put it on there, stick it on, cut it, stick it on there. Cut it. And the last but not least. And that should create a perfect dam for the rubber. Mixed up a little cup of rubber, and I have a very sharp pointed stick. I want to put little teeny tiny drops of rubber down in each one of these little windows. And I've got to be careful to fill them without catching bubbles in there. So you fill them just like you do. You fill from the bottom up, even tiny little things like this. You try to fill from the bottom up. I'm putting a drop on the side of each window, of each hole. And that way it can flow in from one side and flow toward the other side and hopefully fill without catching any bubbles. See, I'm laying the rubber in there, and it should just flow into those cavities, into those holes from one side, pushing the air out. You're always trying to get the rubber or the resin to push the air out in front of it. See how we did that? Neat and sweet, looks good. And you can see how that just filled those windows up, and that's going to create the parting line on this side. The rubber that we poured in yesterday to fill up those little windows is nice and cured. And now the task is to pull off this wolf wax. Doing little finicky things like these little windows, not easy. Oh, that came off clean, okay. So that's what I want to see. I want to see the rubber like that. Can you see that? This wax is pretty sticky and it left some wax residue on there. No big deal. I will go around and we'll clean that whole thing up. I set up this funnel and sprue, and I thought this time around we were going to attach it right here, like that. That way it'll hang in space like that. So let's do a little wax welding. You can see why I rely so heavily on my wax tools for setting up objects for molding. It's just, I have found that it's the most effective way to set up your models. You can see that I put a nice big connection, a nice big sprue on this part. The first one I cast from the other mold, from this mold. I noticed when I filled it that it filled super slow. And let's talk about why that is. So if you look at this piece, if you look at this part, ultimately it looks pretty much, it's a hollow shell, and worse, it has very thin walls. So now what I just did was to attach a nice size funnel and sprue to this object. And this is a nice flow-in amount of resin. But look what happens. As soon as it enters into the part, there's a bottleneck right here. Why? Because the part is very, very thin. So what's going to happen is this is going to fill, but it's going to fill really, really slow. Now, why is that going to fill so slow? Why is it going to take time to come all the way around to get back up to here? And of course, over here somewhere, there'll be a vent, so the air can go out there. So why is this going to take so much time? If you have a sphere, like let's say you have a sphere, this is what you're going to mold, and you put a funnel on it, and you put a vent on it like that. The resin's just going to flow in. It's just going to fill it up. And the mass of resin is pulled hard by gravity, so it's just going to flow because it's a big, large mass of resin. And a sphere has the smallest surface area in proportion to its mass. So it's negligible, the surface tension between the resin as it flows in and the rubber around it. The surface tension is negligible. It doesn't even matter. It just fills. It's just going to fill perfectly, and it's going to push, and the air is going to go around the top. Easy peasy. This is the simplest thing you can possibly cast for that reason. It's the perfect shape. Problem with this is gravity is pulling down on this resin as it flows in, but it's a small mass of resin. And look at all of the surface it's got to deal with. So you have a very small amount of resin and a very large amount of surface. As a result, this is going to flow in really slow, just because the surface of the rubber is going to grab a hold of those resin molecules and want to hold on to them, and it's going to take a while to fill it. Right now, I will clean up this attachment point, and then we'll put on the vents. I've got some sprues and vents put on. You can see I mounted the funnel. There's going to be 3 main entrance points for the resin. This is the main one, and this should flow the resin down into the body, straight down. And then these little side wings on each side coming out from the middle of the funnel will help to flow the resin down the sides like that. And then there's going to be one more very, very important vent right here in the middle. Let's cut it off and let's get some sculpting wax on it. Now it's a little finicky where it touches. What I'm trying to do is vent that little tiny peak right at the top of the helmet. So this is what we wound up with. We have a kind of custom little vent right here. We have 2 vents to the top, and we have 3 inlets. And hopefully with this and a combination of rocking and rolling, we're going to get it to fill properly. But we don't know until we know. Couple of things left to do before we set this thing into the cup and pour this mold. One is these planes right here, the window planes, which you can see the rubber, those are parting lines. That's the whole point, having pre-filled those and cut them. We want those to be parting lines. So when we pour the rubber, we sure don't want that rubber to stick. So break out the old ease release, the old parting agent. I'm just going to use a Q-tip for this job. Spray out a little of ease release in the cup, and then we'll just make sure that we carefully but completely swab it onto that rubber. Okay, parting lines completed. And there's one more thing to do. This piece is going to fill in the mold like this. It's going to sit in the cup like that. And so a place that you immediately see you're going to have a problem is up under here. This is just a prime spot in here. Can you see that? This is a prime spot. And that hole right there is a prime spot to not fill properly. This is what we're going to pre-fill before we set this in the cup and fill the mold. Let's go do it. Mixed up a nice jug of rubber. I can just pick up some rubber and just flow it in there. Oh, I think I got that in there right. Didn't need to do that, but it doesn't hurt anything that I did. What I'm trying to do is get that rubber to flow down into that pocket at the top of the mask and fill it. It'll sag out when we mount the thing, no doubt, in the cup, but it won't hurt anything. Should be okay. Now in a perfect world, it might be smart for me to pre-fill it like this and just let that gel at least, or even cure, and that would mean that nothing would sag and it'd be perfect. But I think we'll be okay. I made a donut, as you can see, of wax, so sticky wax. So let's get it hot. And the reason I did that was this cup has kind of a round bottom. It's not a flat bottom, so a donut sticks to it better. Let's pour some rubber. And as always, we're going to pour from the bottom up. Pour from the bottom up. Push that air out. Now the question is, are we going to have enough? Or are we going to have to resort to the chunkies? Might have to go with the chunks. Let us see. I'm scraping out the cup. Pretty good. When you do, you bring bubbles out. But that's okay, because they're at the top and they rise right on out. Not a worry in the world. Okay, yeah, we're going to want some chunkies, so let's get set up. And we'll put some chunkies in there and fill up this mold. Fortunately, we have the bad first mold, so let's chunk it out and use that. It's always handy dandy when you have a mold that's fresh that you just made. The trick to chunks is to put them in from the top so that they don't catch any air underneath them. You can work a surprising amount of chunkage into a mold, let me tell you. When I cut chunks, I like to cut them fresh, and I like them to be clean. There's not a lot of landscape cutting that where you can trap air in there. This is nice and clean. This will just push right down in there. It's a pretty good sized chunk. And it should just go ahead and just push right on in. It just displaces the rubber. The rubber keeps rising nice and clean. Smooth, just like we like it. And as you can see, no bubbles are rising up. So that means we didn't trap any underneath our chunks. Mold is done. We'll let that thing cure up overnight and we will see what we get. I poured this mold yesterday. Let's cut it open. Not my favorite plastic to cut apart, but it's clear. And so it shows the pour good on video. I usually try to pop the funnel out of there, like that. And that's because then you can look down, see how to plan the cuts. Coming right down this first vent, which is right here. It's also helpful to pull the wax wires out. It does help. You can see I cut jaggy, but I don't cut crazy jaggy. No need. We want to cut nice and straight down the middle here. The great advantage to cut molds is you can have complex vent and sprue arrangements because you don't have a straight parting line. You can have multiple cuts running every which way all over the place. So you can free up a fairly complex cage of vents without any problem. You don't have to be particular. Now let's see, can we free the part? Yeah, now we should be able to free the part. Yes, good, got the part out. I still have 2 more sprues to cut right in there. This is what I mean by you can cut, you can crisscross, you can cut in all directions, and you can free out little chunkies like that. Same with this, you can cut down, cut open those, free those out. All right, I think that's going to be okay. Very good. We've got ourselves a cut mold. Let's see if it comes together, how it holds together. We've got some chunkies in there. How about them for parting lines? Pretty good parting lines. Here's a parting line. Here's a parting line. When you have parting lines that look like that on your mold, you're going to have parting lines that look like that on your casting. Okay, let's put some rubber bands on this boy. Get out some bandage. See what we got. That could be a little tiny bit tighter. So let's put a knot or 2 in those. It's a handy way to fit your bands to your mold. You just put a little knot in them. Tell you what, this mold isn't going to require much in the way of rubber bandage. It is bar tight. Looking good. Very, very clean parting lines. All right, let's go fill this up with resin, see what we get. Now the good advantage is we have the failed casting from the other day. So let's find out. Scale is, are we zeroed out here, folks? Scale is tared. Let's find out what this casting weighs. Not very much. Not 20. Not even 10. Kidding me? Wow, it doesn't weigh hardly anything. Weighs a grand total of like 6.5 grams. It's super light. Super small, so 6.5 grams, but we're gonna have to want stick waste and cup waste and all this other stuff. And so let's be a little more generous than that. Put up a cup. Now we need to tear the scale for the cup. Amazingly, look at that scale, just weighing the cup. These scales, these balance beam scales, which you all love to make fun of all the time, are incredibly accurate and can weigh very fine amounts of material, like fractions of a gram. All right, let's go with, what do we say? Well, 10's plenty, but I'm gonna be generous, and I'm gonna mix a 20 batch because it's easiest. So let's do that. Let's dump. Here's the A side. I always mark my cups, that way I don't get confused. Let's dump to 6. Actually, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna have some fun. I am gonna weigh to a fraction, to a single gram accuracy, just to prove to all you naysayers the accuracy of the scale. As I put these drops in, that scale is rising drop by drop. Right there. That is 18 grams. No, 8 grams. 8 grams, so now we need 16 grams total. Mixed up a nice reddish orange color. Let's dump it on in. We need to get to 6, so we're about 14.5. And right there, 16 grams on the nose. And I know that that is precisely 16 grams. Let's mix, and it's warm in the shop. So let's go. Quick mix, 15 seconds. Okay, here we go. So I'm gonna pour quick. Oh yeah, it's pouring much, much better than the first one did. Now we're gonna need to rock and roll. We're gonna do some serious rocking on this mold. Serious rocking to get that air out of there. Here's a trick. Take an old mold like this and rock it. Rock it like that. And that should help. And I'm rocking and vibrating. And let's see if that's going to get that air out of there. Made a little mess on the bottom of this. No big deal. Top it off. That'll help to clean the top. And we are ready to put this into the tank. Let's do it. Outlet valve is closed. In we go, and away we go. Quick check of the witness cup. Rock hard, we're ready to go. All right, very good. Let's see what we got. Let's see if we did it. Who knows? We will not know until we know. How'd we do? How'd we do? Well, we did a lot better. I'll say that for us. We did catch one bubble right there, little tiny bubble. That's correctable. I could show you how to fix that. And same place on this side. So that's a vulnerable spot right there. But much, much better. Otherwise, very clean cast, filled fine. Everything in the back is fine. Okay, so a couple of small bubbles. I'm going to do two things to make this better. I'm going to rock the mold. I'm going to look at this and decide where I really need to rock the mold to get that out of there. And then I'm going to put the pressure higher in the tank. I think I'm running the tank at about 50. I think I'm going to jack it up to 80, and that will make this better. All right, okay. Generally, the parting line's super clean. Windows are super clean. Everything's pretty nice. I don't have any complaints about that. We do have some sprues and vents to cut off, but that's okay. But other than that, yeah, I think we're okay. I think we'll see if we can get those out of there. This is one of those situations where sometimes when you make your castings and you make your molds, you just have bubbles that you just can't get out of there. It happens. It happens to everybody. And that's when you break out the old epoxy clay or whatever filler you prefer and repair those bubbles and make them seamless. It's one reason why I hate clear resins. With opaque resins and with resins you're going to paint, you can always fix your castings and you can always paint over your mistakes. All right, let's go see if we can't make a perfect one just for fun. What do you guys think? You think third time's the charm? Here's a little tip. See that little black mark on there? You see that? That's just a little bit of marker. Sometimes I nick the mold, sometimes just use some marker. That just tells me which direction that I want to make sure I tip it and rock it. So theoretically, that helps me, based on what I've learned from previous pours, helps me to get the bubbles out if we can. Here we go. Let's let this kid out of its little prison. Let this boy out of prison. What do we got? What do we got? What do we got? No bubbles there. No, look at that. I think we got a clean one. We might, that's weird. I see a tiny, tiny, tiny little flaw right there that might be a subsurface bubble, but it's tiny. Right in there, that's a weird place to catch a bubble. All right, so let's look at this. This is a weird place. If we caught a bubble right there, and I almost think we did, what is that little flaw in there? Yeah, we caught a little pin bubble right in there. Look at that. Well, that'll be super easy to clean up. Not too bad. All right, very, very good. So yeah, and I would be inclined, because this sprue is big, to cut that off at the bandsaw rather than chop it off with a X-Acto, which would take twice as long. Oh, I see another bubble in here. I'm seeing another bubble growing in there. Okay, so on each one of these castings, I caught a couple of little minor bubbles here and there. Generally speaking, they're good though. Both of these bubbles are very easy to repair. This project has been as good an example as I could find for what I talk about a lot on this channel, and that is injection molded pieces were never designed to be resin cast. Injection molding is a completely different process, completely different thing than resin casting. And so when you're trying to resin cast an injection molded object, it's like trying to downhill ski wearing ice skates. Yeah, it's similar. You're sliding downhill. It's a similar activity, right? You're sliding on something slippery, except it's totally different. It doesn't work. And this is a perfect example of it. If you wish to make good resin castings, if you wish to be good at resin casting, first thing you have to do is understand what resin casting requires, and then you have to design the pieces that you make for the process of resin casting. If you do that, casting becomes easy and automatic, and you can do large additions, you can do all kinds of stuff, as long as the parts were designed from the beginning for the process of resin casting. So we will leave this project with these little flaws. Fortunately, the flaws are small, they'd be easy to fix. But if someone came to me and said, hi, I'd like to have you make 100 of these or 500 of these, I would never take the job. I would simply go, nope, can't do it, because I'm not going to sit there and fill thousands of little tiny holes. I'm just not going to do it. Or I would say to them, we can take this piece and we can redesign it and we can modify it so that it would be easy and quick and automatic to resin cast. That's just the way it is. Hey, if you like this video, hit that like button. It really does help the channel. Thanks for watching. I will see you next week.